Welcome to First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down a very intriguing fight night card coming up this Saturday night. And again, before we get to Nick Dais and Lou Finocchiaro and Dan Vreeland and Reed Kuhn, wow, 287. It's in the books, and what a grand finale, if you will, that we saw in the main event. Look, you're not going to win them all, and certainly I was on Alex Pereira. Did not see that coming from the last stylebender. I guess Israel Adesanya showing, once again, why he is considered the greatest middleweight of all time with a stunning second-round knockout of Alex Pereira to regain his belt. Absolutely scintillating. Again, Adesanya closed about a small favorite, about minus $1.40. I just don't think that the prognosticators, like myself, saw Adesanya winning this way. There were certainly pathways to victory, but turning out the lights of Alex Pereira in the second round is a memory that we're all going to have for quite some time. Let's bring in the aforementioned Nick Dais. He is in studio here at Circus Sportsbook with me. Nick, very quickly, before we look ahead to Arnold Allen, and certainly it's going to be a great one, we think, against Max Holloway. What were your thoughts? I know you had a very profitable night on Saturday night at UFC 287.
Yeah, unfortunately, Dave, I was on the other side.
Good for you. That's the right way to be.
Fortunately for me, unfortunate for you, I should say. But Adesanya, also a little biased. He is my favorite fighter in the UFC. And I just had a gut feeling that he wasn't going to get a decision over him. I thought he could put him away. I sprinkled a little bit on the knockout. I thought maybe we could see a Dagestani version of Adesanya maybe get to the wrestling, but we didn't. But he played possum there, and you're right. That knockout is going to live forever.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's one of the reasons why we love the sport, why I'm drawn to it, is for those outcomes that maybe you don't see how that was going to happen, but it did happen. And kudos to the last stylebender. Says there will not be a trilogy fight, and maybe Pereira has to work his way back up if he wants to stay at middleweight. So many possibilities there in the future. Can't wait to see what that holds. When you talk about the 145-pounders, okay, Max Holloway was looked at as arguably the greatest featherweight of all time. I know Jose Aldo stands are going to say, wait, don't forget about me. And now it looks like that's Alexander Volkanovski, right? And now you have a young guy coming in here in Arnold Allen against Maxie Baby, as he likes to say. And Holloway right now is a small favorite, about $1.70, $1.75 out there in some of the marketplaces here. So are you surprised at the number? Is this name recognition for Max? And do you think he should rightfully be this big a favorite against Allen?
These are some of the more difficult fights for me to really handicap, Dave, because I'm not entirely sure what the motivation is for Max Holloway in this one. Look, he's 31 years old. He's still a young buck, but man, does this guy have a lot of miles on him.
He does.
He's beaten everybody that's ever been thrown at him at 145, except for Volkanovski. Volkanovski just has his number. But when there's another contender coming up, an Ortega, Yair Rodriguez, who's going to be fighting for the belt against Volkanovski over the summer, he makes these guys look pedestrian out there. And when I look at this line, and as you mentioned, Max is a small favorite over Allen. Unless he's completely fried, Dave, which could be the case because of the wear and tear, man, I see this fight being a minus 700, minus 800 for Max Holloway.
Wow.
Yeah.
If this was prime Max, best version of Max.
That's why it's such a difficult thing for me to answer and be confident in. I'm so conflicted on this fight because Arnold Allen is a guy who's on a 12-fight winning streak, undefeated in the UFC. And this is a massive step up for him as well, going up against Max, because we thought it'd be a step up against Kattar. Unfortunately, the way that fight played out with the injury, it didn't seem that way. But for him to get through Max, I think it'll put him right in the title shot, because Max right now is, for you to fight Volkanovski, you got to get through him.
It's bizarre when you look at the tail of the tape and you see 29-year-old Allen, 31-year-old Holloway, 31.
Yeah.
Like in MMA years, it feels like 51, right? That's how long, and everybody, obviously at 145, this is the guy, right? This is one of the greatest of all time. What is the pathway for Allen? Because you stand and trade with Max Holloway, that's normally not going to be a successful recipe.
The thing that's interesting about Allen is that he has a lot of similarities to how he fights like Volkanovski, but at this point of his career, he has way more power than Volkanovski. And I think it's going to be similar to a fight that we saw a couple of weeks ago with Sandhagen and Vera, where the power might be the difference in a decision, the wear and tear on Max as opposed to Allen.
Yeah, it is going to be a fascinating potential 5-round matchup, obviously, being a main event. And I think you nailed it, Nick. Really, if Max is still poised to get back his crown at 145, right, then that would be the quote-unquote motivation for him. But Allen, he sees this as a gatekeeper, right? That's what Max Holloway is. Now, if you get to notch that belt and put that one on your resume that I beat Max Holloway, instant title contender, right? That's what we're looking at here. So you do have to kind of look at the motivation for each fighter. If Max still wants to go back to that long road to get back to another shot against Alexander Volkanovski, it would start with an impressive victory over Allen. Again, when you look at the height, Max has got a height advantage, but Allen has a small reach advantage. So it's like, what style? Because Max would love to stay on the outside in exchange for 5 rounds.
Oh, yeah, and he has the cardio for it.
Yeah.
He's a kind of fighter that I really like watching, Dave, who he puts the pressure on you, keeps the pace the same way in minute 1 to minute 25, and it's going to be fascinating. You're absolutely right, though. Allen is going to need to get through this hump of Max Holloway, and then he would probably get the winner of Yair and Volkanovski.
Look at the numbers here in the prop market for the fight to go the distance. You can get it, yes, without picking a winner, at minus $1.35. It is juiced minus $1.50 over 4.5. So again, kind of look at those pathways. If you don't want to lay the price tag with Max and you think he is going to go all 5, you can get Max at plus money at plus $1.65 via decision. Do you think he still has the finishing power? Because a KO, TKO, or DQ prop is only at plus 240 versus decision at plus $1.65.
He doesn't. He's a fighter where you'll never see any memes of Max Holloway knockouts because it's an accumulation of 350 strikes. I think he holds the record for most significant strikes and 3 of the top 4 scores. And with Max, I do like the decision on him. I actually like you could get a plus 800 on Max to win by split decision, especially with the judging being a little wacky. I'm not familiar with Kansas City that much. I know if it was in Texas, I'd feel a lot stronger.
Or if it was in England.
Or if it was in England, yeah, that'd be different. We'd be on the decision for Allen. But I'm leaning towards Max pulling away with this one.
I think that seems like the better way to go there if you want to back Max, because to Nick's point here, does not seem like he still has that power. It is over time here if he can get out Allen there before 5 rounds. But again, plus $1.65 via decision. Talking to Nick Dais, of course, he is the host and the founder of Veterans Minimum. Great to have you back in the program. I do want to talk about the co-main.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we talk about legends, Max Holloway is a legend in MMA. Edson Barbosa is one of those guys that when he decides to hang him up, you look back and you go, man, did he fight everybody? Right? That's Edson Barbosa. Now he's going up against Billy Q. And Billy Q here is the favorite against Edson Barbosa. You can get about plus $1.45 here in the comeback on I don't know if Barbosa qualifies as a legend, but certainly somebody that we so much respect in the marketplace. Is this a lack of respect that Billy Q is a minus $1.70 favorite?
I couldn't agree with you more about Barbosa being a legend. Talk about a highlight tape. All his finishes have been outstanding. And like you said, the who's who. He's fought everybody at the 155 and now being at 145. The thing with this fight, Dave, that's interesting for me is it's going to look like a lot of Billy Q's fights. Early on, he's going to try to weather that storm. He tends to drop round 1, and then his cardio and his pace outlasts a lot of his opponents later on. So I'm looking at something where a prop of Edson maybe in round 1, I think is his only path to victory to get a stoppage. And then looking at Billy Q, maybe round 2 or 3. He did it to Alex Hernandez the last time they were out in December at the pay-per-view in Vegas. I'm looking at Billy Q to be able to put away Barbosa in round 2 or 3.
Wow.
With the pace that he puts on. That is, however, I do tend to bend this way. Path of victory.
Yeah.
I think Barbosa in round 1 is extremely live, and I think he'll probably win round 1. But I'm looking at Billy Q to weather that storm and get a W.
I hate to go against a guy like Edson Barbosa, but that makes a whole lot of sense here as we discuss First Strike this card this weekend. I want to get to some of your best bets in the time that we have allotted here. And Nick, I know that you're looking at, say, possibly Dustin Jacoby here against Azamat Murzakanov here. Why do you think the lean should be towards Jacoby in this one?
He's a world-class kickboxer. Fun fact, he lost a fight in Glory Kickboxing to Alex Pereira, who is this all-worldly kickboxer that we've seen. But he does a great job of keeping guys on the outside. He will have the size advantage over Azamat in this one. And I think he is a fighter that does not really get into firefights. He likes to keep you on the outside, use his jab, get inside, massive height advantage, 6'3" versus 5'10". And I really like this matchup for Jacoby. He's a guy who, I don't want to say a gatekeeper, but to get closer to the rankings, you got to get through Jacoby.
You absolutely do. So again, Dustin right now, minus $1.70 against Murzakanov here, plus $1.45 on the challenger, on the underdog here. Let's get to another one of your best bets. A really interesting fight, Chris Gutierrez against Pedro Munoz Which way are you leaning in that one?
Gutierrez, one of the best nicknames in all of MMA, El Guapo, 7-0-1
So
since
pretty.
moving to the 135. He's a very interesting fighter because from the waist up, he's a point fighter. But those leg kicks, oh boy, he's gotten 2 stoppages in the UFC via leg kicks. And this is another one where Gutierrez is coming off a win over Frankie Edgar. They're giving him Pedro Munoz, a guy who has been a top 5 guy for a very, very long time. And this is a massive step up for El Guapo, Chris Gutierrez. But I think he's going to get it done. He's the younger fighter. He's on this streak right now, Dave. 7-0-1 in this division. He's the hotter fighter. And I'm leaning towards him being able to get a decision over Munoz.
45 seconds, Nick. Your best bet of the night? What do you like the best?
It has to do with my favorite fight on the card, Royval versus Nicolau. I think fight doesn't go the distance is my favorite play. You can get a nice number on that. And Royval is one of the funnest fighters to watch. He'll throw up submissions off the back, standing. He is very versatile in that aspect. And Nicolau, 7-1 in the UFC. He was a cast off of the Save the 125ers when they got rid of that division many years ago.
That fight's on the prelims. Shows you how good this card really is when you can get to Nicolau against Royval there. Nick, love having you in the studio, man. Appreciate it. And again,
an honor,
everybody, give him a follow on Twitter and check out Veterans Minimum. Very cool stuff, Nick. So we'll catch up with you again soon. When we come back, Lou Finocchiaro next here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for all of the terms and conditions. We love talking to Lou Finocchiaro each and every week here on First Strike. Go out to Lou in the great state of Arizona. And you can follow Lou as I do, at Gamblou. He's the host of the About Business podcast. Lou, have you exhaled from UFC 287 yet? Because I still can't believe what I just saw, to quote the late, great Jack Buck.
Dave, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. This program's great. I know we're getting great hits and people are listening to all the perspectives. I'm tickled to be on with you. The answer to that, fortunately, is yes, I have been able to turn the page because the UFC with 44 plus or minus cards a year doesn't really give us a lot of chance to bask and glow if in case we won. In the case if we didn't win, the good news is you march right ahead and you have another challenge the following week. So really enjoyed it Saturday night, a little bit Sunday morning, but then you got to go ahead and prepare the next card. And that for me is a Sunday bit of work. And so we're on to Kansas City.
There, in the immortal words of Bill Belichick, we literally are on to Kansas City here for this main event. Let's talk about it because, you know, when I look at Max Holloway, we're talking about one of the greatest featherweights of all time, right? We all understand that. And if Allen wants to be in that conversation one day, you got to beat the Max Holloways of the division before you can even think about the Alexander Volkanovskis. I wonder about Arnold Allen coming over here, right? Coming to Kansas City, kind of middle America here, against a guy in Max Holloway's fought all over the world and just about every venue. He's fought everybody there is. And the tip of the spear, as our guy Britton Hess likes to say here. And now it's almost a $2 betting favorite for Holloway. Is this because they think this might be a little bit too much too soon for the 29-year-old Allen?
I think that's part of the reason. When you look at who Holloway's been in with, there's just certain respect. Listen, the only guy that's bested him is Volkanovski, who's the top pound for pound. I'm not a big fan of that, but clearly he's the pound for pound king. And Max has fought competitively with him 3 different times. I think there's also a component that we don't know Allen very good, understated kid, very well-rounded from the Union Jack in England, but he's quiet and he isn't a chest beater. And for those reasons a little bit, I think maybe he flies under the radar to an extent. As I look at this fight, I see surely an ascending fighter, an underrated fighter in Allen. approaching a guy in Max Holloway that I'm certain is on the other side of the best of his career at only 31 years old. Now, the key to that is, while I believe there is some waning in ability on the Holloway side, is it enough for a guy like Allen, who steps up so large, to overcome him? And I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think there's a lot more work during the week that needs to be done. I want to listen to these guys talk in interviews. But I think that as far as the line of the fight, Dave, I think we're lined correctly. And I think that Allen surely has a path to victory here.
Absolutely. And Lou, when you see the total, obviously at 4.5, you can understand why, because Max at this stage, well, he's never really been a one-punch guy, right? He's been a volume guy. We know that. So you would think it would take him time to get up on the scorecards against a guy like Arnold Allen, who maybe, being younger, even though it's 6-1 for Allen to get a KO, TKO, or DQ, plus 240 for Max Holloway, more than likely, fight to go the distance here is minus $1.35. What do you make of those price points for the total sitting right now, 4.5, juice to the over at minus $1.50?
Yeah, I wish we could have seen Allen compete a little bit more in the Cater fight. That said, it looked like he was going to have it going his way. But we're robbed of a little bit of data by not getting all of that in. As far as the total is concerned, I feel right now at this perspective, at this point in the week, that my perspective is that this thing goes over. If there is a finish, I would think it would be Holloway, because it's going to be a larger cage. He's going to have room to maneuver, and it's Allen that has to do or find some way to get inside and engage.
I want to talk about another fight that I know that you like, and I'm certain that you've probably discussed it on the About Business podcast, which we'll get to here. But when you look at a guy like Ian Cutelaba, kind of can be a wild man in there against Tanner Boser, what do you make of this one? Right now, I'm seeing Cutelaba about a minus $1.25 favorite here, pretty evenly aligned, at least according to the odds makers.
At this point in the week, but when it opened, it was Cutelaba that was the plus 125. Boser was the minus 150 favorite. And really, that's how I view this fight, as Boser maybe being a slight favorite. Why? Because he's a heavyweight dropping down, and I suppose there is some question of his ability to make that weight. But his last fight at heavyweight, he was 226 or 229, and was really undersized, though competitive, as a heavyweight. I look for Boser to shine. I think he's the faster guy. The issue with Boser is that he really doesn't have a lot of great wrestling defense in the form of takedown defense. And the good news with Cutelaba is that his IQ is so low that he doesn't use the Sambo and Greco-Roman wrestling that he comes equipped with, choosing instead to throw down. So should Cutelaba acquiesce Boser by standing with him, I think he makes it Boser's fight. And Boser as an underdog, I think, is tremendous value. I have no problem making that move right now at plus 110. I made the move a week ago at plus 105, thinking I was stealing. So those that want to be involved in this fight, now I see it's plus 105. You might wait a little bit to see if the line goes up, but really Boser at a plus price, I think, is more than attractive.
But by the way, I love where your head's at there, because again, we've talked about this a lot with fighters that maybe don't utilize the actual skill set that would give them an advantage over the opponent. And if Cutelaba does not use the wrestling, which Boser is deficient in, then at least takedown defense, then you're really going to be live at a plus price point here for Boser to get him out of there. Conversely, when you look at the fight to go the distance here, not expected to go all three, plus $2. If you think they can bang for 15 minutes in there, would you look at Boser there at plus $2 for KO, TKO, or DQ, or the long shot there at 16-1? Because I know you like the dog here.
I do like the dog, and when I really don't put it past Boser to finish the fight, but to be so specific as to KO, TKO, which is more than likely his avenue, I play a little safer, go the ITD, the inside the distance, which includes the submission. And in that case, you get a little less price, maybe not 2-1, but you sure will get better than the plus 105 that Bozer's offering. For me, I've already released it. Bozer plus 105 is plenty greedy enough for me, and I'm happy with that position.
Yeah, I'm with you again. If maybe it was 4 or 5 to 1 for KO, TKO, or DQ, you could hop in there. But just at plus $2 when you're already getting plus value on the underdog, I love that analysis there. Very quickly, Lou, give me another fight on the card that right now you're seeing a lot of value in here on a Tuesday for First Strike.
Well, if you look at the first fight of the night, you got a Czechoslovakian vice grip grappler in Pudilova, who is going to take on a gal from Panama that's large and strong and needs distance to execute her Muay Thai striking, knees, elbows. Great clash of styles. Pudilova starts as a pretty decent sized favorite. Minus 140, minus 175. She's been bet down to current minus 145, minus 140. Edwards, the big, strong Panamanian striker, I think is in a great position here. She has 5 UFC fights compared to Pudilova with 1. And I think the size and striking acumen of Edwards puts her in a great position. She is currently an underdog, but may not be so for long. So I would go ahead and find that one sooner rather than later.
Plus $1.15 right now on Edwards. So again, small dog here, but that number has been coming towards the Edwards camp here. So to Lou's point, you better hop on that. Could be pick 'em by the time we get there. Got about a minute to go, Lou. Look, the About Business podcast is fantastic. Tell the people what they get each and every Friday in a fight week, what they're going to hear.
What they're going to hear is 16 minutes of final releases for that week's UFC card. Right now, it's been, knock on wood, it's been a good start to the year. The first quarter, we're running at about a 17% return on investment, 8 or 9 units ahead. But that's in the rearview mirror. We're looking ahead to this week in Kansas City. And I just want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to voice some opinions on this excellent show, Dave.
No time to rest on the laurels of the past success. Lou Finocchiaro is always looking ahead to the next one. Lou, appreciate you as always, my friend. Give him a follow at GamLou. Enjoy the fights. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks so much, guys. Good luck, everyone.
There he is, the best, everybody. Lou Finocchiaro. When we come back, we're going to go to Boston and catch up with our guy, Dan Vreeland, up there and see what he thinks he's going to see in this Holloway and Allen main event come Saturday night. Come on back. It's First Strike here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. There's a lot to bet on in the next 30 days, and for a limited time, you can subscribe to VSiN for just $9.99. That gets you insight into daily baseball best bets, NBA, NHL playoffs, and the Kentucky Derby and the upcoming NFL Draft. Only VSiN Pro subscribers get access to our daily recap of the top plays made by VSiN show hosts and guests. Tools like our betting splits to see where the money and bets are moving for every single game. Also, a top VSiN experts leaderboard to view betting records, profit, ROI, see which VSiN experts have the hot hand. So sign up now for just $9.99 at VSiN.com/subscribe. Love catching up to the pride of Boston. He is Dan Vreeland. You can follow him on Twitter as I do at Gumby Vreeland, writer at Gambling Podcast and Cage Side Press, host of Top Turtle MMA and SGPN MMA. Dan, great to have you back on after UFC 287. We turn the page. We got another pretty intriguing main event here with Holloway against Allen. Very quickly, looking back on UFC 287, what's your biggest takeaway?
I mean, my biggest takeaway is Israel Adesanya is what I thought he was. He's a guy who makes adjustments. Everybody's talking about the mental space of the guy, and I know we love to talk about, the mental space of former champions losing their title. Kamaru Usman, same thing. But this is a guy who's on a different plane, and I'm glad he finally got to prove it against Alex Pereira because, he's really one of the special talents we've had in the sport, and to not appreciate him as such is kind of a shame.
Absolutely. When John Jones beat Cyril Gane, I can't go against the greatest of all time at light heavyweight. We'll find out about a heavyweight. I went against Adesanya, paid the price for that at the middleweight. He is the greatest middleweight we've ever seen. Max Holloway, you can make the case, is the greatest featherweight we've ever seen until Alexander Volkanovski and those great fights that they've had. Now Maxie's back in there against a younger guy in Arnold Allen here, 29 against 31. but Max feels like an old 31. Allen feels like a young 29. How do you view this potential 5-round matchup here, and what could be a precursor possibly to a title run for either one of these guys?
This is a really hard one for me to handicap. I'm actually leaning with Arnold Allen here ever so slightly. And the fact that he's at plus 160 makes me like him even more. I think this is an example of liking the side and the number that comes along with it more than I actually like the fighter. I think if you flip a coin on this fight, it's damn near close to even. So to see plus 160 on one side, I certainly like that for Allen. I think that's where the value is. The big thing for me with Allen is I think he just mixes it up more than anybody else in terms of people who have given Max Holloway trouble. You look back to the Calvin Kattar fight. Calvin Kattar got lit up by Max Holloway. But the fact of the matter is Calvin Kattar, who does have decent wrestling, just didn't mix the wrestling in very much. And if you look back at Max Holloway in some of his fights with, the likes of Brian Ortega and Alexander Volkanovski, it might be early to talk about Arnold Allen in the same vein with those two guys. But he gave up takedowns to both of those guys. And Arnold Allen is a guy who throws enough takedowns out there that it might at least make Max Holloway a little bit more hesitant on the feet. I also think he's a little bit more aggressive. And, I don't know what the 5-round Arnold Allen looks like, but as you said, he is a younger, less miles on the tank kind of guy. I'm hoping that the cardio holds up here because I do think the plus 160 spot's a good one for Allen.
Because, Dan, when you look at Max Holloway, we know he can box. If you want to just make this a kickboxing or straight up boxing matchup, he can go all day. So 5 rounds won't be a problem for Max. Is there a concern, because you mentioned the gas tank there of Allen, because we really haven't seen it, to go deep potentially in this 5 rounds. Plus, coming across the pond, fighting in Middle America and Kansas City, does that factor in at all? Or do you think that's just going to be another day at the park for Allen, who needs to start fighting across everywhere in the world, not just in England?
The travel worries me a little bit less than the fact of the matter is he's got to wrestle, right? Like he's got to wrestle a little bit to win this fight, in my opinion. And I haven't really seen 5-round Arnold Allen against a guy like Max Holloway. So that worries me more about than the travel. You never know how somebody's gas tank looks until you've seen it go a little bit deeper. We saw that with Raul Rosas this last weekend.
Right.
We saw it with Jackie Amorium this past weekend, right? 2 fighters who we've seen finish people in the first round time and time again. This is not the same exact thing here with Arnold Allen. He's more proven than that. But seeing him go 4-5 against a guy like Max Holloway, it worries me a little bit. But I will say, again, with the price tag as wide as it is, and if it widens in fight week, which I kind of expect it to do a little bit, as Arnold Allen pushes that plus 200 number, I think the value is all right there.
When you look at the co-main event here, Dan, and again, when you look at Max Holloway, you kind of look at Edson Barboza, right? 2 of the best that we've seen in this weight class for quite some time. And now Edson is plus $1.50 dog here against Billy Quarantillo. So Billy Q right now, minus $1.70. What style of fight do you think we could see for potentially 3 rounds in this co-main?
You better see Billy Quarantillo wrestling his ass off because, who wants to box with Edson Barboza? And I think Billy Q knows that. He goes in with a sharp game plan every single time he fights. And I think that's why you see the number where it is, right? Negative 170 does not tell you how good Edson Barboza is because Edson Barboza so good on the feet. But the fact of the matter is Edson Barboza's given up a little reach here, which is not usual for him. He's coming down to featherweight after being at lightweight for as long as he was. And granted, he's been down there for a couple of fights now. The couple of fights he's been down for have been Dan Ige, a guy who's shorter, shorter guys. He's going to be up against a guy who's as tall as him, who's longer than him, and who's going to have a massive wrestling advantage. And, we were talking about the cardio in the last fight. I think it's a problem here with Edson Barboza, too, who is a guy who is shown he gasses out a little bit, especially when somebody brings the wrestling game to him. So, yeah, give me Billy Quarantillo here. I think he wears him out.
Yeah, I'm sure Edson still has nightmares of Habib going for another takedown, right? So Billy Q probably needs to wrestle and follow that mode because it worked very well for Habib back in the day. When you look at a guy like Tanner Boser, talking about weight classes here, coming back down now from heavyweight to 205 to take on a wild man in Ian Cutelaba. What do you make of Tanner now? Plus money here, plus $1.05 we're seeing here on Boser. Do you think the weight cut's going to hurt him to try to squeeze into 205?
I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I like Ian Cutelaba with the wrestling. It's one of those things where, first of all, Tanner Boser had a lot of issues with wrestling up at heavyweight. Now, granted, the guy's much bigger and much stronger than him up there. We're talking about him fighting Rodrigo Nascimento, a guy who had, 40 pounds on him at fight time. And Ian Cutelaba will not have that kind of weight advantage. But Ian Cutelaba is such a strong light heavyweight. And when he gets in on the legs, apart from the fact of the matter is he's left his neck out a bunch of times and gotten subbed. Apart from those submissions, his wrestling and attack on the wrestling has been very good. He's looked at exceptional, especially when he's got you up against the cage, switching between singles and doubles. He's putting his head in, he does really well with head pressure. I think all of those things play well against a guy like Tanner Boser, who really just wants to box, right? Like that's what Tanner Boser wants to do. And he's dropping down to light heavyweight with the hopes of running into more boxers, running into guys who can't just steamroll him. And I think, unfortunately, they just gave him a guy who's like the most likely at light heavyweight, or at least that level of light heavyweight, to steamroll him with the wrestling. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of wrestling out of Ian Cutelaba. We better see a lot of wrestling out of Ian Cutelaba. And I don't know that the weight cut will hurt Boser because he's already kind of a smaller guy. He was a really small heavyweight. I don't know if it'll hurt him, but I'm not sure he's ready to wrestle for 15 minutes with Ian Cutelaba.
Yeah, if Cutelaba wrestles, it could be a very easy night for him, but will he wrestle is always the key. Like, use your strength against the other guy's weakness. Goots is back in there. Chris Gutierrez, he's been red hot against Pedro Munoz, Pedro Munoz has been in there with some of the very best in the division. What do you make of that matchup of one guy feels like he's ascending and maybe somebody else maybe in the slight decline in Munoz?
Well, thank you for finally giving me a fight where I don't have to explain that one guy's going to out-wrestle the other. Because in this one, we're just going to see them stand and throw, right? We saw with Pedro Munoz, he was willing to stand and throw with Sean O'Malley. So if you're willing to throw with Sean O'Malley, you're willing to throw with anybody. And I think that's a problem here against Gutierrez. Because Gutierrez, one of the things you'll notice that he does so well is, first of all, he stays away from leg kicks. And it's not even necessarily always by checking them. It's by maintaining the right kind of pressure and getting out of range when he's not ready to throw. And, Pedro Munoz likes to throw that leg kick. He likes to rip to the legs constantly. And as long as Chris Gutierrez continues to give that forward pressure that makes Pedro Munoz back up, that makes it harder for him to land leg kicks, that makes it harder for him to get his game going, I think Chris Gutierrez is going to pick him apart on the feet. I think he's going to have a pretty easy time doing that. Like you said, we're seeing kind of the decline of Pedro Munoz. And for me, the decline of him was when he stopped being able to get a lot of his grappling going. Because he's got good hands. You're 100% right. But when his jiu-jitsu game was on, that's when he was most dangerous. And now it seems like as he's aged, that wrestling, that jiu-jitsu part of his game has kind of slipped away. And he's kind of gotten a little bit too comfortable throwing. And against a younger, faster, sharper guy like Chris Gutierrez, I just don't think that plays. So I actually like the number on 215 for Chris Gutierrez, and I like the finish number too. Whatever it comes in at, I think he gets him out of there.
1 minute to go. Speaking of age, Clay Guida, I can't wait to hopefully have his energy when I hit his age. What do you make of the Carpenter here over a $2 betting underdog against Rafa Garcia right now, minus 250?
I'm not sure I'd make Clay Guida a $2 underdog against anybody because that's the kind of game he brings. Right. And so with that being said, I love the value coming in on Clay Guida time and time again, because at plus 210, this guy could just go put on a wrestling clinic for 10 minutes and win those first 2 rounds. He also very easily could just put a pace on Rafa Garcia that Rafa Garcia fades down the stretch.
Right there with you. It's good we can get that kind of value on a guy like Clay Guida, the ageless wonder that is Clay. Dan, appreciate it as always, my friend. Enjoy the fights. We'll catch up again next week. When we come back on to Washington, D.C., Reed Kuhn next here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Back here on First Strike, Dave Ross here at Circus Sportsbook in Las Vegas, going out to the District of Columbia, the one and only Reed Kuhn. You can follow Reed as I do at Fightnomics, the author of the book of the same title. Reed, being in the district, and I was there for almost 20 years. Are you a cherry blossoms guy? Do you go check it out here as we spring into spring?
I think maybe once since I was a kid, but now it's a huge tourist attraction. I don't even get near it.
Stay away, because it's just too much down there at the Tidal Basin in Washington, D.C. Reed, great to have you back on. I've been asking all of our guests here on the show, what is your biggest takeaway from UFC 287? Absolutely scintillating a stoppage by Israel Adesanya. I think one we'll be talking about for years to come.
Yeah, I think we went through this a couple of weeks ago where I walked into a weekend thinking Boy, I'm a little surprised where the numbers led me, but then they did not leave me behind. They didn't let me down. I had a great night. Just some of those picks, Gastelum. There was a lot of hype around Chris Curtis, but Gastelum delivered. There was a lot of hype on Pereira in the rematch, and Israel Adesanya did exactly what we were hoping he would do. And even Kevin Holland, I was a little worried about the hand injury, but he delivered. So yeah, all around, it was just a great night for us.
I'm sure that the dinner was tasting a little bit better as you fix up a nice plate for each and every big main event. This card is interesting because you look at a guy like Allen, 29. You look at Max Holloway. This is a legend in the featherweight division. You've got a lot of volume, certainly on Max. But what about Allen? Do you have enough data to feel secure in a main event pick here?
Well, he still has almost 2 hours of octagon time. And obviously, there's been some matchups where I've been speculating because you got someone with 20 minutes or 30 minutes. They're only, 3 or 4 fights in. That is my cutoff, is based on the number of fights, actually not the number of minutes. So in rare situations, we might have some guy who just blasted through the competition and, still minimal sample size. But yeah, I think at this point, his signal is reasonable. I'm still going to be doing qualitatively, hey, sitting back and looking at who his opponents were versus Max Holloway. Max Holloway obviously is going to be fighting the best of the best and has been for years on end. Someone like Allen, yeah, he probably cruised a little bit against some opponents early on, and now he's facing the better quality, but how much of his stats were earned against easy competition? But when I'm running the model, I'm still picking a winner here, and actually I am going with Holloway again. I see value even at a slight favorite price. I still think he's bankable. And then you layer in what I just said about the fact that his numbers are more believable because they were earned against top level talent.
And Reed, when you look at the total, you can understand juiced a little bit here, minus $1.50 for 4.5 rounds. Max is a accumulation guy, right? He's a guy that's going to give you the volume and eventually, hopefully, from Max's side, wear you out. Does that lead you to an overplay here at 4.5 rounds? And again, you look at Max by decision at plus $1.65. I fell into the trap last week, to be quite honest, about Israel Adesanya, not thinking he could get a knockout. Do you think Max Holloway, maybe we're forgetting that punching power a little bit? He is plus 240 to get a KO, TK, or DQ.
Well, he's racked up 8 knockdowns in his career, but when you look at it on a per strike basis, his knockdown rate is actually pretty low. It's below 1%. So, he's got to land over 100 head strikes to put someone down. Even Arnold Allen actually shows up on paper as being slightly a harder hitter. But I don't really think either one of these guys is a one-hitter quitter. I don't think they're going to put each other out early on. Yes, I would lean the over, and I have been with Max Holloway for a long period of time. He's more likely to get the late stoppages, and we haven't seen Allen in championship rounds before. But I also tend to take a conservative approach when it comes to the over-unders. I say over, but lower the limit. Take the higher price on a 3.5 or a 2.5 even. Maybe that's going into a parlay for you. But those are a little bit more dependable with Holloway because he could finish it late with an accumulation.
I love that strategy. So again, if you're picking up what Reed's putting down there, you got to pay more of a tax, but maybe throw into a parlay and get it down to 2.5 rounds or 3.5 instead of the 4.5, which is minus $1.50 right now. Co-main event, another legend, Edson Barbosa. I think it's fair to call Edson a legend at this point. It is going to be interesting because you don't see dog prices on him that often. He is plus $1.50 here against Billy Q. What do you make of Edson at this advancing age, if you will, with a lot of octagon time?
I think that's what's driving the price here. I think there is a lot of hype behind Billy Q. I myself have been backing him a few times recently. And Edson Barbosa is another guy who's been around forever. He's usually fighting stiff competition. And maybe you're thinking he's a little bit more damaged at this point. But Billy Q is actually not that far off in age. He's only a few years younger. And when I line up the stats, yeah, I see some dangerous striking from Billy, also some aggressive takedowns. But Barbosa has long been the feared striker. He is used to defending takedowns. He actually has very good takedown defense. He's hard to pin down, constantly getting back up. And there is just something nasty about his striking, whether it's a wheel kick or knees or just the leg kicks that chop people down. No one wants to just stand and bang with that guy. And I do think maybe people are sleeping on him a little bit. He is still offensively very capable. That's not something that goes with age. Offense is usually still there. It's the defense you have to worry about. And Quarantino coming in here, 50% head strike defense is horrible. That is probably the worst on this entire card. So you're saying a guy is going to come forward, be aggressive with Barbosa with the worst head strike defense on the entire card? I think that's a recipe for an upset.
The Uber tail of the tape, you see it up there. A lot of check marks in Edson's categories there. And again, these come to us from Reed Kuhn. That's why you got to read the book and also give him a follow at Fightnomics. It's very interesting. And again, plus $1.50. I'm sold on that with all the advantages that the numbers have led you to. When you look at a guy like Ian Cutelaba, we know he can wrestle. The question is, will he wrestle? And if he does wrestle against Tanner Boser, it feels like it could be a nice matchup for him. Boser coming down from heavyweight here. What do you make of this matchup now at 205? And does that weight cut factor into what the numbers are showing you?
Hard to say about the weight cut, but it's interesting. You always throw some guys. This is an ESPN card. And for fans that are not paying attention to where the fights air, you're getting fun matchups on ESPN cards. And so that's why we're seeing some old legends being thrown on this card. In this case, you have two guys who seem to go out on their shield willingly. With Cutelaba, we have seen him lose a lot by submission. Now, that was against really good grapplers. Tanner Boser has never even attempted a takedown his entire UFC career. He is not the grappling threat here. So if ever there was an imbalance for grappling, this is a better matchup for Cutelaba than when he's facing guys like Glover Teixeira and people like that who are going to be superior on the mat. So all of a sudden, Cutelaba goes from a liability of getting submitted in prior fights to, he is actually the likely guy to be in ground control and threatening with submissions in this matchup. And I like that. I think the original odds were flipped. I saw Tanner Boser open as the favorite and was thinking myself, whoa, that is unusual. Cutelaba, even though he has a lot of losses, came from very good competition, and I think he's more dangerous here. So I'm actually hoping that the grappling comes into effect here. Tanner Boser, good takedown defense, maybe slightly above average, let's say, but also not against a ton of attempts. So I think he's more green on the mat, and I hope it gets exposed.
Reed, we've talked about this a lot with you, and I find it fascinating where sometimes the number will get out of whack to where you actually find value on the other side because the number's gone maybe the way we didn't forecast. Now it is Cutelaba at minus $1.25. Still playable in your estimation? Because, again, as you mentioned, he opened up as the dog and now has swung to the slight favorite.
I do think it's still playable. In terms of the modeling, I'm actually using him as the favorite here and still seeing value. Unlike with Edson Barboza, I had him at a lower dog value, and now he's even higher return. So that's upside for me.
Let's look at another fight that I know you've got to lean on here, and that would be Zach Cummings against Ed Herman here. Right now, you can get Zach's a pretty big favorite, minus 215. Is this a live dog scenario, or do you think this is aptly priced?
I think it's more accurately priced. This is a weird one. I mean, first of all, these guys they've been around for a long time. But if you look closely, even though Ed Herman goes all the way back to early tough episodes, I don't think he has a win over an active UFC fighter, which is kind of mind-boggling. Both these guys have been out of the game for a while. I wonder if this is like a dual retirement fight. They both maybe had an extra fight on their contract and they're getting paid. So it's an appropriate matchup. Although, like with Ed Herman, he's also been switching weight classes. So, ignore all of that complicated factors outside the cage. I still like Cummings here. Now, he's a guy who, hit or miss. I think both guys are hit or miss, but just numbers-wise, Ed Herman has always been a little sloppy. And yes, he can be dangerous in some situations, but he is also very vulnerable. And I think Cummings is a little bit tighter, more controlled. He's a little more crisp on the stat line. And yeah, he is capable of knocking people down. He has 5 knockdowns and a knockdown rate that is way higher than Herman. So I actually think he's going to be the better wrestler and the better striker here. So hence the line is the way it is, but I'm backing it.
Got about 30 seconds to go. Let me sneak in Rafa Garcia, minus 250 against the Carpenter Clay Guida. Do you think that's a fair price? Because normally people are going to go, wow, I get over $2 on Clay. Is he a live dog?
No, last time he was like a 5-1 underdog. And yes, there was value there because he is capable of wrestling for his life. He will just, lay and pray essentially and be very busy on his feet, just not very effective. Rafa Garcia, I'm backing him slightly here. I just don't see a ton of value in the price, but I like Garcia.
All right, the numbers never lie. Certainly Reed Kuhn, the best at doing just that. Reed, enjoy the fights, my friend. We'll catch up again next week, and thanks for watching, everybody. It is First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.